Secretly recorded from deep inside the bowels of a decommissioned missile silo, we bring you the man, one single man who wants to bring light to the darkness and dark to the lightness. Although he's not always right, he is always certain. So now, with security protocols in place, the protesters have been forced back behind the barricades and the blast doors are now sealed. Without further delay, let me introduce you to the host of HuttCast, Mr. Tim Huttner.
Thank you, Sergeant at Arms. You can now take your post. Today on HuttCast, we do have in our studio today a wonderful candidate for State of Minnesota Governor. Dr. Neil Shah is going to sit in and give us his perspective on things. So sit back and let's enjoy some conversation with Dr. Neil Shah, Governor candidate for the State of Minnesota. Buying a gun is no ordinary purchase. Whether you're a hunter, competitive shooter, or self-defense is your priority, there are many kinds of guns and many kinds of training programs. You use your brain all the time. You will rarely need to use your gun. Before you find yourself in a situation where you need to make a critical decision, make sure your training is the best you can get. It could be the difference between life and death, or freedom or detention. For the best quality training, check out permittocarry.us. If you live in Minnesota or Wisconsin or even Florida, give Gene German a call, 612-388-2403. That's Permit to Carry US. Or call Gene German at 612-388-2403.
My name is Neil Shah. I'm running for governor, and I approve this message.
Welcome to HuttCast. In our studio today, we have a governor candidate, Neil Shah. Shah is running for Minnesota State Governor, and let's hope that he has the best of success. Mr. Shah, or should I call you Dr. Shah?
You can call me Neil. That works great.
Neil, okay, Neil. Let's start with who you are.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on the show, Tim. I mean, this is just an amazing studio, and it's a pleasure to be here. So I'm a physician, a father, a husband. My parents came over here from India about 50 years ago. They settled in Chicago. So I was born and raised in a western suburb of Chicago. Was there till I was 18. Went to college outside Philadelphia, small liberal arts college. Came back to the Midwest to go to medical school at the U. Was there from 2003 to 2007. So that's what brought me to Minnesota. And had a great time at the U. Decided to take a residency spot in dermatology at Mayo Clinic. So I was there from 7 to 11. And lived in Rochester in that time and moved back up here. Started my practice about a decade ago and married my wife, Sarah, during residency. And we've got 3 little kids. I should fix this. We have 4 little kids as of yesterday at 6 p.m.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yes. So I'll be headed over to see Sarah and little Dessa this afternoon.
So you're at HuttCast and you had a child yesterday.
That's right. Now there's no rest for the wicked. Well, when they're number 4, you kind of get a little more leeway. And I have a very, very supportive, amazing wife. So Sarah's like the light of my life, and she's like, yeah, you got to go do this stuff and, come back here, help me change some diapers and get her home.
Now, what made you jump into this race? I mean, it's a tough race this year, mm-hmm. and there's a lot of great candidates. I've had them here on HuttCast, and I love every one of them. Mm-hmm. What gave you that something drives you? There's mental currency in this for you. What was that?
Well, I think just you can see from the number of people out here that there's a lot of unhappiness with what's happened during Tim Walz's first 4 years, and many of us are not sure we can handle another 4 years of that. We're fearful of what's happening to our state, and we're very fearful of what's happening to our nation. And I love this country. My parents love it. They came here, and I was given a functional constitutional republic by my folks, and I'm concerned about what I'm going to be able to pass on to my kids. And so when I looked at the state of the race last spring, I was very upset with what had happened under Tim Walz's watch as it pertained to COVID, what was happening with the economy that's only gotten worse, crime in streets and neighborhoods I used to live in. And I said, we have to do something different. Otherwise, this state is going to just continue down this pathway, and it's not going to end well. And so I looked at the folks that were running. I said, I have something different to offer. I think I'd give us a better chance in the general election. And so I decided to put my hat in the ring. I mean, a year ago from today, I did not think that I'd be doing this. We got into the race in August, and it's been an amazing experience since that time. And no easy thing, right? I'm running a practice. I mentioned started the practice 10 years ago. It was 1 clinic, 5 employees, and now it's 7 clinics and 40 employees. And we've been very blessed with that, but that takes a lot of time. I still operate 3 days a week and have to run the practice, and we're growing.
Still got a business to run.
Still got kids at home, hockey practice, gymnastics, piano lessons, all the same fun stuff. It doesn't stop. So managing that and a campaign, difficult thing. And then if I get the endorsement next weekend in Rochester, then I'll find a surgeon to come in and handle my caseload, and I'll do the campaigning full time. But
as I said to you pre-meeting here, if you do get in, HuttCast has a podcast at the Governor's Mansion and the jacuzzi.
That's right, jacuzzi. Well, we should do the podcast from the jacuzzi.
We'll need waterproof equipment.
That's right.
So, not to sidetrack you, but I got you. I hear you. It's a noble cause.
Yeah.
There's a whole state of policy, and it's the only intelligent thing I ever heard Obama say was, "I thought change would be easier." And he was on Johnny Carson, or no, I'm sorry, that's how old I am. He was on Jay Leno, and that's still even old. How are you going to implement this change? Because you see what's going on, and I don't want to turn this into a show of doom and gloom and hate.
Right.
I want to know what's in your head.
Well, yeah, I think it's the same disappointments in the heads of most Minnesotans. I mean, let's just take our schools. We got schools that have been failing kids, and dramatically that's picked up in the last couple of years. It's the kids who can afford to lose the least are losing the most. Trillions of future economic earnings. Some of them have kind of fallen off the radar because they were barely hanging on anyways. And this fake remote school that we foisted on kids for so long. No other civilized country did that. None. No other civilized country put 5 to 12-year-olds in masks. Like, literally, we're alone in the G7 in terms of doing that. We sacrificed the education of our kids to appease the teachers' unions, and I think that they will be held to pay a severe price. History will not be kind to what they've done, but there's kids in marginalized communities who are doing worse and worse every year, and if the problem could be solved by simply throwing money at it, we would have solved it by now. And it's going to take significantly more, and predominantly it's going to getting parents back in charge of their kids' education, and if they find themselves in areas where the districts are failing and their kids' needs are not met, then we need to be able to give people of all economic means the opportunity to find the place that best serves the needs of their kids. So, educational policy with 3 school-age kids and soon to have 4, it's extremely important to me. That's the battleground of the future. If kids don't graduate understanding basic economics and civics and math and geometry and competent writing and critical thinking skills and science, really, how are they going to be able to contribute as tax-paying U.S. citizens as they get older? And that's a big worry. And I think we've ceded that ground for far too long as conservatives. And and this is one that really should not be a partisan issue. People want a good education for their kids, but we're getting more and more wokeness into our schools, more and more radical racial essentialism that goes against everything that civil rights heroes like Martin Luther King stood for. I mean, I grew up in a colorblind, merit-based society, and now that ideal, which is the correct ideal, is decried as racist. We had blinded auditions for symphonies because there was a problem with qualified women not getting in. And lo and behold, once you took away the ability to see who was interviewing and just listen to them play, it solved a lot of that problem. And we're going backwards on that issue. Now we want to go back to racial essentials. Why do I care about the color of your skin? I care, how smart are you? How hardworking are you? Are you a nice person? Are you going to fulfill the needs that my business has? Are you going to work hard in school and turn in good papers? And the political leanings of the teachers should have no relevance. They had no relevance when I grew up. You could tell. You could kind of tell where they were, but I certainly disagreed with a fair number of them, and I still could get an A.
I have this thing. If the student can pick your ideology, your background and political, you're a bad teacher.
Yeah, I agree. And some of these things, like there's just no room for anything. I mean,
Right.
math is like the most pure, beautiful thing
Yeah.
ever. It's truth and beauty, and we're perverting it.
Yes, without a doubt.
So so you look at the schools, you're like, okay, we got to do something about this. You look at the streets. I mean, Sarah and I used to live in Longfellow and East Lake Street, and that's where the 3rd precinct was that
You're
burned
right.
down. And those neighborhoods, they still haven't recovered. I mean, it's painful to see. So certainly the big chain stores, they reopened. But those minority-owned businesses, half of those businesses were minority-owned small businesses, and they haven't come back. And they may never come back. Who's going to be held to account for that? Tim Walz failed to act. He'll have a chance again to fail to act, and people will pay the price. It needs to be held to account.
I grew up in South Minneapolis. 36 Minnehaha, not far from where the whole 3rd precinct and stuff was.
Yeah.
So I still have family down there, and for the life of me, I can't figure out why they're still there. But that's their gig.
Yeah.
And you talk to the people down there. They're neighbors, friends. They go to church together, and they are so disgusted with what they did and how they handled it. Where the police guys, they're like, we're going to make a strong stand, and then Waltz and the mayor decide we're going to just play the devil's advocate and let milk out.
Well, I'm all for peaceable protest, but the minute you start throwing bricks and burning down people's lives' work,
Nothing peaceable there.
there's nothing peaceful there.
Yeah, it was a riot.
That's right. It was a riot, and it could have been contained. And to Frey's credit, he asked for help, and Walz slow walked it. And I've talked to people who were in that Joint Command Center, and they're like, they were sitting on a request to deploy the Guard, and if they were deployed in force, I think that would have been it. And you would have preserved those neighborhoods. You would have given protesters a right to peaceably protest in areas and be protected from violent counter protesters or whatever it is. But instead, they just chose to not act. And I think that's emblematic of this whole career political class that has ensconced themselves both in St. Paul and in Washington. And, some of these folks are found on both sides of the aisle where their concern is what is going to play well in the next election? What is going to keep me in office? Well,
How do we get votes?
yeah.
What is that magic ticket to get votes? Right.
Well, I'll tell you that the magic ticket is do your job.
To you and I who own a business, yes. Who are paying for this.
It's such a broken, cynical game. And until we get, look, the country was predicated by the founders on there being citizen servants who go and serve and then go away. Go back to whatever it was, being a blacksmith or a farmer or running a business. That ideal has gone. But I think that we are on the cusp of seeing a resurgence of that because people realize what happens when you leave these professional politicians in charge for too long. They're paralyzed by inaction.
Yep.
They stand for nothing.
Yep.
And they are unwilling to defend anything.
Representation without taxation.
Yeah.
Or is it the other way around? But either way, you're right. So I'm hearing term limits from you.
Absolutely term limits. I mean, we need them all across the board, and people are reasonable on this. Like a 2-year congressional term is too short. You don't even know where the bathrooms are.
Yeah.
But clearly 20 years is way too long. And so, okay, we've bounded the problem. It's somewhere between there. Let's kind of try to hammer this out. And I think most people intuitively understand that 8 years, like 2 4-year terms or 2 5-year terms or whatever, something in that range.
Anything.
Right.
Yeah.
That's going to be reasonable. You know what to do. And then you serve, and it would also improve, finding the person to replace you. If you realize that you have an expiration date, you're going to be very motivated to train and cultivate good people to follow in your footsteps. We don't have that. It's just backbiting and infighting on both sides of the political aisle.
Okay, shifting the gears here. Did you know that and I've thrown this at all the other interviews here, lithium polymer iron phosphate is the new battery out. It's supposed to be the cat's meow. Benson knew about it. She knew the guys who at MIT brought it to Minnesota. And with all our red tape in the way, our hazmat, our this, our that, our taxes, snot out of everybody who's trying to make a living and pay for the ones who vote for a living, what would you say about them guys rekindling this in the Iron Range area of Minnesota, because that's kind of your territory if you win?
Well, all of the components of that battery can be pulled safely out of the ground in an environmentally responsible manner, creating high-paying, good jobs in the state of Minnesota. We could build an entire electric car, battery to final assembly, without leaving the state. That's amazing. No one wants to do that. Who wants to start a business here?
In Minnesota, yeah.
Because the government's going to slow walk a permit. Do you think the people that live in the Iron Range want to pollute their groundwater? Do you think that they want to endanger the economic prospects of tourism in the Boundary Waters when so much of the revenue derives from that industry? Of course not. It's this bizarre. You see the same thing happen with farmers and the DNR and MPCA.
Right.
The farmers aren't going to take care of their land. I'm pretty sure they drink that water, and I'm pretty sure they want to pass it on to their kids. So there has to be a way that we can work together. And you've got the government just slow walking permits for mining. And here's the real rub is that we are, as a country, willing to get conflict rare earths from oppressive totalitarian regimes. We are willing to see child slave labor in the DRC in Africa pull out cobalt from mines when we could be pulling it out safely with high-paying jobs in our state.
In our state, which would be a boost for us.
It's a boost for everybody. It's a moral win against what's happening with that slave labor. It onshores more of our supply chain so that we're less geopolitically unstable and vulnerable. And it's great for the state of Minnesota. We're almost a $400 billion economy. There's no reason in a decade that we couldn't be a $1 trillion economy if we get out of our own way.
If we get great point. If we get out of our own way.
If we get out of our own. And I'll tell you what, because federalism is so fantastic, we are in the lab of the states, and the states around us are outcompeting us. Now, we're a better state. We're better in every possible way, more diverse economy, better trained workforce. Obviously, they're going to argue about this in the other states. They'll be wrong. We're just a better state, but we're not run as well. And that is what's hobbling us. We have more natural resources. We have a more diverse economy with very robust services sector and manufacturing. We have amazing higher education and the best healthcare in the world. And yet, we are hemorrhaging jobs. We almost lost our 8th congressional seat because we are not keeping up with the states around us that are all better governed. So the problem in Minnesota is a governance problem, and it's one that can be addressed by starting to boot out these career politicians, shrinking the size and scope of government, making the government that we do have transparent and accountable to the people, and helping greenlight high-paying jobs and businesses, and at the very least, not scaring them out of the state into the open arms of surrounding states.
Not tax them out of the state.
Yeah, that's what we're doing.
Yeah. Well, I chair an EDA in Dayton, and one of our things is Dayton, Minnesota, just by here. We can't make it difficult for them to come in the city. We can't make them jump the hoops, and we've had a reputation of that for years. And I said, as chair of your EDA, we're going to stop that right now. Mm-hmm. They're on our tax base. Mm-hmm. Let's make them work.
Well, there's this idea that you somehow have to play favorites with industries or incentivize business to come in. I think that is completely wrong. The job of government is not to pick winners and losers in various sectors of the economy. It's to get out of the way and naturally encourage those people to come in. Let your workforce speak for itself. Let the qualities of the state, the amazing quality of living that we have here, the amazing healthcare system, let all of that be the welcome mat that brings businesses in here. We have businesses that want to leave failing states like Illinois, where I was born and raised. Why aren't we attracting them here? We're not attracting them here because the tax and regulatory environment is not something you want to deal with.
Yeah, that's just a moment of thought there, isn't it? Why would we tax them on the way in?
Right?
Why beat them up?
Right? Why make life hard for them? They're trying to bring jobs here. They're high-paying jobs to our economy, and we're just saying no thanks.
On a regular basis.
Yeah.
So I get it. All right, we'll grab another gear. Let's talk about. Let's see, we covered the battery situation because that's kind of a good thing for northern Minnesota. Mm-hmm. How are you on 2A?
Love 2A. I mean, so you have to understand, we could do a super deep dive into the philosophical underpinnings of the Second Amendment and the glorious revolution of 1688, and then the wording of the Militia Act where people get confused. And the bottom line is that without the Second Amendment, the Constitution's a piece of paper.
Yes. And
it will be run roughshod over. And even with the Second Amendment, you see states every day ignoring it. Shall not be infringed is pretty clear language.
Yeah.
And yet it's infringed everywhere. In Minnesota, if you have to ask the government for permission to carry a weapon to defend yourself, you shouldn't have to ask the government for permission to worship at church or to speak your mind.
Yeah.
But yet here we are asking for permission to, even purchase
I'm sorry,
certain types of
tax
weapons.
our permission to.
Right.
We got to pay for that permit.
You have to pay for that permit, and you have to pay for it again every 5 years.
Yes.
So, and then people are like, well, I don't want someone that's an uncontrolled schizophrenic to have a gun. Neither do I. But tell me how those laws function. How long has murder been illegal? And yet, we're setting records in Minneapolis and St.
here
Paul.
we are. Yeah.
So what those laws do is they disenfranchise non-prohibited persons, right? Citizens who legitimately can defend themselves. It disenfranchises them. And what the data shows us ever since all the violence kicked up during the summer of 2020 is that a disproportionate percentage of first-time gun buyers are women and minorities.
Yes.
And these are folks living in neighborhoods that are getting more and more unsafe due to this defund the police mentality. And they say, look, I never thought I'd have to do this, but now I understand why I have the Second Amendment. I want to be the final arbiter of the safety of my kids and my business. And so they're choosing to be armed. Obviously, as someone who carries every day, I want people to be responsibly armed. I want them to understand how to use, if it comes to it, understand the law around that. But it's a right. It's a natural right to defend yourself that's enshrined in our Constitution, and it has to be defended vigorously. And we need someone out there who can explain to people why we have that. So many Republican candidates will put it on their literature as a talking point, and then you hand them a weapon, and they don't even have trigger discipline when they hold it for a photo.
Start waving, everybody.
That's right. They just flag everyone on the camera set. So, do you just put it on your lit, or do you actually believe what it says in your core? Let's not forget that our country used to have legal slavery. Let's not forget that in the last century, without due process, we took U.S. citizens of Japanese descent and we put them into internment camps without any process.
Due process, yep.
Let's not forget that bad things can happen, and that the founders very much intended for the Second Amendment to be the final bulwark against tyranny, individual tyranny or governmental tyranny. And that's a message that I think people need to understand. It's not there by accident. It is the defender of the remainder of the Constitution, and it's something that we need to ensure that people have a right to access.
Gene German did a 6-part episode on HuttCast. And if you get time, I know you got busy, but you listen to him do his thing. He's a LEOSA trainer, which trainer.
Yeah.
And he's the guy who's training FBI, SWAT, the guys who do this for a living, he's training them. Very good information. Gives you the reference point. Just a all-around great show.
Awesome.
I enjoyed that one tremendously. So we got your take on the 2A. You believe it, you feel it, you have it in your heart.
We absolutely need someone who can defend it, because in this state, let's just take something that I would say is probably the least controversial. We have very bad laws, very few laws to clarify self-defense.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there recently was this case in Hennepin County where a woman was given no other choice but to use deadly force to defend her family from a armed home invasion.
Right.
And, the county attorney sits there for 3 weeks. Maybe I'll charge you, maybe I won't. And this isn't someone who has the means to lawyer up. This is someone who is going to get crushed by the system simply because they had no other option. It shouldn't be up to that prosecutor. It should be clarified in law that you do not have a duty to retreat if you're in risk of great bodily injury or imminent harm or risk to life or life of another. So if someone tries to carjack you at gunpoint, what are you going to do? Hey, wait for a minute while I unbuckle my kids from the back seat, and then you can take the car? Of course, if someone wants to take my car, you take the car. You're not going to go in a gunfight. I may not have another option. The first thing they teach you in self-defense is don't put yourself in that situation, right? But there are situations where you unfortunately have no other option, and you need to make sure that the law is not going to come down on you simply because you had no other option.
Because you protected yourself, yes.
You protected yourself or your family.
Now, we didn't make that decision. So if you're the carjacker, and we've had this discussion with Gene, he's got a gun at your face. The window ain't going to stop nothing. It's just going to shatter glass in your face or whatever this perp is doing. Do you think that was your decision?
Right.
It absolutely was not your decision. You have to either gas it, gun it, go it, whatever you can do. But they brought you into that crap sandwich. Mm-hmm. And you're absolutely right. We need a way to say, you're not taking this car with my kids.
Yep.
We don't care about the car.
Right.
Well, you kind of do, but you don't.
But you don't. I'm not going to, even in a situation where it's a quote unquote good shoot and you're justified. No one wants the more. That's the other thing. People don't realize that there's a moral. You're going to have to answer to your creator for what you've done.
Yes.
And you're going to have to live with that every day. That's a lot of therapy no one wants. So there's this myth on the left that somehow everyone's going to have a holstered 6-shooter and run around shooting people in the streets. Look, an armed society is a polite society, and everyone that I know that carries every day is extra careful to not find themselves in situations where things
go out of your way
sideways.
not to. And we're a gun dealer, so we see a lot of this at the shop. Mm-hmm. And you're absolutely right. A lot of people who haven't had guns before, which, by the way, I get to cheerfully deny the people who were fighting for us all that whole time. The guys who say, well, you don't need a gun, so therefore you shouldn't have one. And if you're going to have one, we're going to tax the snot out of you for it. Yeah. I get to deny those people, and I'm enjoying that.
They don't realize how hard it is to actually purchase a firearm. So when the riots kicked up,
yes.
They had, friends, lefty voting friends, who all of a sudden understood why, and they're like, well, what do I buy, and how do I get good? And then you explain to them, like, you just can't go to the store and buy an AR. You can't even buy anything with a pistol grip without asking your sheriff for permission first for permit to purchase. And their minds were blown.
Yeah, you're right. And they thought that there was laws in place.
Yeah.
And there are laws, but they're not enforced. Yeah. There's a lot of laws that aren't enforced. And when I got an answer to the feds on the 4473s because this guy might have lied on there, dude, you don't want to be part of that.
Oh, I can imagine that'd be terrible. People don't even realize the 4473. They don't. They get the first time they fill it out purchasing a firearm, they're like, what is this? You're like, well, you're going to have a gun check. You're going to have a background check.
Well, what do I need one of those for? I'll just pay extra more money. It don't work that way. I'm not getting a felony for you.
That's right.
There's a lot of work to that.
Yes.
But again, I am still enjoying the fact that I need one now. No, not for me. You're not. Is that like, was there a support group for that? Enjoyable deniability? Either way, but you're right. And we need that. And I had Jai Hansen on a while back. I don't know if you caught that episode. 6'6" black guy, 240 pounds, raised in Bloomington. Great, heck of a great guy. And I says, Jai, if your name's on that card from here on out, are you going to make it easier for us to get a start station? Well, that would be policy. And I said, well, that you're the guy. You're setting policy. Mm-hmm. He wanted to put out more stations to go and get your concealed carry. Mm-hmm. We have one in Osseo. There's one in Minneapolis. There's downtown. Nobody wants to go there. So I don't know how many there are by you as a sheriff's station, but that's what we should have, shouldn't we?
We should make it easy. And so, constitutional carry, you wouldn't have to ask permission at all.
Right.
And that, I think, is the ultimate goal. But, the Castle Doctrine, stand your ground, that one shouldn't be controversial at all. That should be a first 100 days in office with the Republican House and legislature. I think it'll be needlessly difficult, but that just, again, it's not controversial, and I wouldn't be surprised if folks who live in CD 4 and 5 actually stand up and you get some bipartisan signatures on that bill. They're the ones that are most affected by the violence and every day, and they need the ability to know that they're not going to be maliciously prosecuted for defending their family.
So let's talk to Jai for a second. Sure. If he wins or Kirkland wins or whoever else is running that particular race, as a governor, would you roll out the red carpet and say, run your organization and make us safe again? Or how would you approach him?
Well, I want decisions to be made at the local level, right? And there has to be decentralization of that power in St. Paul. And that's at a federal level, too. The states should be much more powerful than the federal government. And then local municipalities and counties should be, more powerful than the state. I get concerned when I see things like today, the announcement that Minnesota State Police, are going to backfill these missing spots in MPD. I mean, that's not the role, because you're going to pull them off of some other thing. Minneapolis has to get their policing right, and they have to do it for the people who live in that city. And as a temporary stopgap, okay, maybe I could see that, but that's my concern, is it'll end up becoming more permanent, and that's not the way the system's engineered, because you are going to pull those people off of interstate narcotics cases and sex trafficking and all the other stuff that, should be a function of what the state police are doing, or even just off patrol, right? Keeping our roads and highways safe. And you can put those people on patrol in North Minneapolis when North Minneapolis should be doing that. I mean, some of the staffing is so thin right now that you might have 2 squads in a precinct in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
That's nuts. And what are they going to respond to? Shots fired? That's basically it.
Right. And they write a report. So what do you do when you get the guy who oh, I need to call the police, and we're going to send out a negotiator or something. What's that term?
Oh, yeah. These de-escalation, conflict de-escalation people. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what's going to de-escalate that? The trigger.
Well, this is the issue oftentimes, is that the left will have an idea and there'll be a kernel of useful truth in that, and then it just goes too far the other way. You can't send a negotiator that's unarmed into a gang war.
Never could.
But at the same time, should there be people, if they're struggling with mental health and an acute mental health crisis, that they have someone that's got much more training than a patrol officer that you can call on? Absolutely. But the problem is, it's, with oftentimes progressive thought, it's all of this, it's an all or nothing and a broadsword and no nuance. And so we want to pull armed cops off the streets and replace them with whom? And how long are they going to last? And what are they going to be able to do? And what's their mandate?
Okay. So you want to roll out the red carpet, let them do their job.
Let them do their job, get the state out of their way.
I was trying to quantify all that.
That was a good summary.
It was
I want to leave states and municipalities, or cities and municipalities alone. I mean, let's take another thing that I'm not a fan of at all, the Met Council.
Oh, you're on my page now.
Met Council destroys local rule. They tell you how to zone. They tell you what type of buildings to have there. They tell you how to run your city. And like all governmental programs, it starts with a good idea. Mm-hmm. Let's not have septic systems in between cities. I agree. Great idea. But what they should have done was, Bloomington and Richfield should get together and have a joint powers agreement, a JPA, to deal with water and sewer, and they can build a municipal plant that serves their cities. We didn't need to create this behemoth. All government programs get larger with time, and the Met Council is no exception to that. And it needs to be dismantled and eventually disbanded. And everything that was useful, like talking about water and sewer, that Met Council could do, can be done under JPAs between cities. I mean, you have cities with shared police departments. Mm-hmm. You have cities with shared water rights.
Fire departments,
yeah. Right? So we can do it. We don't need some other inflexible authority above us telling us how to run our city. Let us figure it out ourselves.
And they hold cities hostage all the time.
Oh, they do. Yeah.
I mean, as far as my city goes, they're constantly holding hostage. You'll have high density housing. You'll do this in this zone. I'm well, in the city we're in now, Champlin, they kind of told council to take a hike mm-hmm. to the point where they can, but because Dayton's growing and it's so big and huge that they're actually shaping the way their policies are landing. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, dudes, we can't let them do this.
Right.
We need them.
Don't shape land use. Let the city determine for itself. This is, again, any top-down authoritarian system is inevitably going to make decisions that don't fit the needs of the people that are there. This is why we have markets. This is why we have individual actors. In a given city, they might categorize you as emerging, suburban, or rural. Those boxes are way too big. You need, as a city, to decide what best fits your needs. Maybe you're large, and you have a small section that's higher density and more commercial, and then you have parts that are actually still ag and may remain ag for a long time. You need to decide. And it should be the elected officials closest to the people, most accountable to the people. That's the other part, too, is Met Council's not elected.
Right.
They're appointed.
Yep.
And all of these appointed people have to go away. It has to be elected people who can be held to account by the people that they are there to govern. Otherwise, you end up with these sclerotic institutions that serve, the quote-unquote deep state or swamp. They serve their own interests. They no longer serve the interests of the people who put them there.
Mm-hmm. Now, our function in Dayton is an EDA, and we are appointed, but we also have term limits. Mm-hmm. And I keep telling everybody, look, you can't make a deal with one of us. You got to make a deal with all 5 of us. and that's another thing that gets happened. It's out of check. One guy starts making deals, and by the time you know it, it's all skewed, and they're doing the, hey, buddy, help me out here thing. Mm-hmm. All right. We're going to grab some overdrive now. Let's talk education. Are you familiar with the FIRST program?
Refresh my memory. FIRST
is a high school robotics engineering team type of thing. I've helped serve for Maple Grove. Very little serving, but I did help. And as a state function, as a country function, these kids go from high school to high school and compete in lifting a cube, shoving a ball through a hole, whatever FIRST decides to make happen. Mm-hmm. Would you have any type of ways to make this easier for this FIRST team to excel at these high schools, whether it's a high-end school or it's a not high-end school? How would you actually approach these guys and say, there's funding here for you. Let's engineer you guys some engineers.
Yeah. Well, also I'm going to step back a couple steps and, say first, what is the proper role of governance as it relates to education, right? To provide for an education that serves the needs of the kids. Well, I don't know what serves the needs of the kids in Virginia, Minnesota, because I don't live there. And so I get concerned when we cherry pick any set of pet projects that any one of us like. Look, I love science. I'm a professional nerd. So it's easy for me to say, like, yeah, fun science. We need more science. That's great. But that's because I like it. And I'm not sure that's a compelling reason enough to do it. If the parents and the students in a given district feel that specific utilization of resources towards STEM is something that serves the needs of that district well and those kids well, they should be free to allocate the resources to that. So I always get nervous when the state starts saying you got to put things into this bucket, you can't put them into this bucket, because it just could be that those buckets don't fit the needs of the people at the end of it.
In their area, sure.
And much better would be to say, like, look, here's your money. You deal with it. I don't want the Minnesota Department of Education setting curriculum for individual districts. Because, again, I think, look, reading, writing, arithmetic, fine, but like after fifth grade, things start to diverge and kids have individual needs that need to be met. I find it very hard to believe that centralized, unelected bureaucrats in St. Paul can meet those needs better than a school board.
Well, according to Paskey now, no one knows better to teach your kids than the government.
That's right. They'd very much love that. And I'm a product of public schools that were in a totally different era. So is my wife. And so, I think many people listening to this may assume that it was that era. Look, I was born in 1980, right? So they assume that public education remains like it was when they grew up. And I'm here to tell you that it's just not. It's not that anymore. Yep. And so that's step one, right? Realize that you have a problem. We have a massive problem. We're not meeting the needs of our learners. There is much more indoctrination in there. As much as the left wants to gaslight on this, all you got to do is look at the curriculum. Any draft curriculum that did not acknowledge that the Holocaust existed, like that, is insane.
How do you not teach history?
How do you not teach history, and the good and the bad? I mean, when I was my AP history class, like we did a mock trial on the My Lai massacre. For those that are not familiar, that was U.S. troops murdering innocent Vietnamese. And, we were on the defense. We were representing Lieutenant Calley. And so we had to try to make the case for the defense. But like, you read very deeply into that whole thing, and you have to teach kids the good and bad parts of American history. Like I said, this is a country that in the last century interned U.S. citizens without due process. And in fact, one of the most powerful dissenting opinions in Korematsu, that was that decision, was I believe he was either former or went on to be a Democratic governor in Michigan. But he had this blistering dissent of like, we can't do this. There's no exigency that allows you to usurp the constitutionally protected rights of U.S. citizens. And here we are running all over those rights under the guise of, war fever. And it's just incredible to realize that, that our country did that. And so the good and the bad has to be taught, right? I mean, the Supreme Court has gotten many things wrong. Dred Scott and Plessy versus Ferguson, which stood for greater than 50 years. Korematsu, I would argue Roe versus Wade is of that same cloth. And
you went there.
I did go there.
You went to Roe versus Wade.
Yeah, well, it's one of the worst decisions ever. Even the honest people who try to construct an argument that you should be free to kill an unborn child, many of those, if they're honest, will argue that it really was a bad decision on the legal merits of it. It does not acknowledge the 10th Amendment, that it never should have been a federal issue, and that the legal reasoning behind it was so flimsy and flawed that it never should have stood. And this should always have been a states' right issue. And that's what it seems like it's going to go back to. So that there's a confusion there that all of a sudden everything's outlawed and this and that. No, it just returns it to individual states. And the lab of the states will figure out the best fit for the folks in those states. And obviously I have been unabashedly pro-life from conception to natural death, and I'm happy to defend and discuss any of those. It puts it back in the hands of the state, and as a believer in that federalist system where states should be very powerful and the federal government should be very weak, That's the right place for it to be decided.
Very good point. Very good point. I get everybody's got different views on that, and mine's probably different. Yours is different, but at least we can talk about it.
Right. Well, that's in a larger sense, that's the bigger problem we have. I mean, before we started, I mentioned, look, there was a period of time not too long ago. You had pro-life, pro-gun Democrats that were in greater Minnesota, and you had disagreements between the left and the right on the size and scope of government, but everyone loved America. They just disagreed on how to make her better.
Right.
We have moved so far away from that with this divisive rhetoric that Tim Walz and these career politicians are so fond of, that's driving us away from our neighbors. We're not going to survive the economic horrors that are going to be foisted upon us by this hyperinflationary environment and the increasingly unstable geopolitical environment internationally. We're not going to survive that without our neighbors. And we need to get back to understanding that this is the greatest country that humans have ever made, the greatest, freest country. And that if we don't get our acts together and start defending her and working together, we are in a boatload of trouble. And there is no backup plan. There is no other country that allows you to have this much freedom, that recognizes your God-given rights, and that is dedicated to preserving your natural, inalienable rights. So we have to get back towards that, and the poisonous national discourse that we have is not at all helpful. We have a failing legacy media establishment that makes money off of clickbait headlines and driving people further from one another.
Right.
You have complete balkanization of neighborhoods. You have tearing down of institutions that used to hold us together. Let's get back to disagreeing on, sports teams, right? Like we can all agree that Green Bay Packers are terrible. So let's get back to that reality.
Sorry, Wisconsin.
I mean, it's a statement of fact. Like, look, I grew up in Illinois. I'm a Bears fan, which I'm sure will be people will get mad at me in the general election, but I'm not going to bend on that. And so we got to get back to more important things as a state and certainly as a nation. We have countries all around us that want to tear us down and destroy us. The last thing we're going to do is afford to just continue to go on this war path on the inside.
So we are 40 minutes, 30 seconds into this segment. What I got to do is take a break here, and then we're going to, well, if you want, we're going to come back and talk some CRT. You on their schedule for that?
That sounds perfect.
Okay, so for HuttCast, stand by. We'll be back momentarily. We hear a lot about air quality these days. So keeping your indoor equipment running clean and efficiently is important to your health. The experts at Dependable Heating and Cooling in Coon Rapids have been servicing the Twin City areas for more than 25 years. With the latest and most efficient technology available, they will repair or replace your equipment and keep your indoor air healthy and comfortable. Call 763-757-5040. Our team of experts is standing by, waiting to help you with all your indoor needs. Mention you've heard about this by listening to the HuttCast podcast, and you will receive a $50 off any repair. That's Dependable Heating and Cooling. 763-757-5040. Dependable Heating and Cooling. Welcome back to HuttCast on this glorious Sunday afternoon. Dr. Neil Shah is in our studios, and he has given us his 2 cents, 3 cents, 5 cents on how he sees things in today. His pragmatic approach is what we do here. And today, Dr. Shah, let's talk about CRT. And I don't mean cathode ray tube.
All right, critical race theory. Let's pull apart those words so we can kind of understand what they mean. So critical, that's an important word. Some would say it's critical. But the critical component of it, you'll find this in other things. So there's a critical theory, which is a amoeba that crawled out of academia some years ago, and it has its roots in socialism. So it's this theory that it's actually a dogma. So it's not rational thought. So it is an unassailable dogma, closer to a cult than it is to something that could be rationally discussed. Because rational discussion means you have to have a potential that the kind of null hypothesis is correct, meaning that you have to be able to disprove the underlying assertions that you're making. Mm-hmm. But if they're undisprovable, now you're into the realm of what we call non-rational thought. So that's the basis of religion, right? So you can't prove or disprove the existence of God. You take that on faith, and then you have some dogmas that follow from that. But if you're going to have a theory that you discuss within the bounds of rational thought, and I think even CRT proponents would say that they belong in that universe, they're not trying to start a cult. Okay, so if you're within rational thought, then you have to be able to prove or disprove the underlying assertions. And that's where all critical theory falls apart. So they take their assertions to be unassailable truths, that there will always be this Marxist class struggle, that there will always be this inequality, and that's fundamentally where all of their theories fall down, because that's an assumption, and I'd like to attack that assumption, but they won't let you, no matter how much proof you stack up. Mm-hmm. So on their face, these are irrational. So irrational is calling a square a circle. So on their face, any critical theory shouldn't even be discussed, because it's not a rational form of discourse. But there's, believe it or not, there's critical legal theory, critical medical theory. It's frightening. And then there's critical race theory. Okay. So this posits that all race relations or race issues are the result of these systemic problems within the system. Never mind that you could stack up evidence that would attack that baseline assumption. They ignore that. So when they say there's no way for blacks to succeed in America because there's systemic racism.
Okay.
And then you say, well, the wealthiest groups in America are Nigerian Americans and Indian Americans. And they would say, well, those groups are white adjacent. Like, it just becomes this bizarre, any evidence you could show them that would be compelling and convincing in the other direction is promptly ignored and belittled. So critical race theory teaches that we should view everything through the race of lens, or the lens of race, and that no amount of evidence to the contrary that certain races are doing particularly well, if we even want to entertain the theory of race, but for now let's just entertain it for the purposes of our discussion, are evidence that the system's broken. So all inequality of outcome is evidence of inequality of opportunity. So you look at the NFL and you're like, well, look, Asians are 5% of the population, and 5% of the players are definitely not Asian. Therefore, there is systemic racism in the NFL. You could also look at it and say,
how about the NBA?
Well, right. So black Americans are 13, 14% of the population, and clearly more than that percentage is represented as the fraction of players in the NBA, and therefore the NBA must be systemically racist. That's what they're doing. So they're saying that there's no other potential explanations other than race. We want to ignore socioeconomic status. We want to ignore aptitude. We want to ignore interest. And so any inequality of outcome. So Bob and Jim didn't end up at the same place. It's not because Bob's faster or Jim worked harder. It's simply because the system is broken and it hates Bob's. That's what critical race theory is. And it winds itself primarily into continuing education venues, right? So where this dogma is asserted as truth, and it is unassailable, and it is force-fed to teachers at various conferences. And then they're expected to go into the world and view their students and their inequality of outcomes through this lens.
So let me pump the brake there.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about the Black women's Supreme Court history nominee justice, Katina Brown Jackson? And the only reason she was hired is because of her color.
Well, so that's a theory, right? So this is the problem: is these things are so damaging because perhaps she is the most qualified person available to fill that role. But will we ever know?
Right.
How many people did we pass up? Sri Srinivasan, right? So of Indian descent.
Okay.
Many argue he could have and should have been appointed by Trump. He's kind of more moderate, but very qualified and distinguished. And many would say should have been and was more deserving of this Supreme Court justice role. Completely bypassed. And I'm sure you can put that same argument behind any number of white jurors and perhaps others. So if we're going to set our universe not to the most qualified individual, and she could be, I don't know. But if you've already restricted your universe to dump out potential people who may be more qualified simply to optimize for someone's ethnic background and skin tone, you have done your nation a great disservice by keeping potentially amazing jurists out of a very important role at a very important time. And that is kind of the crux of this whole anti-merit issue that we find in education at every level. It should be that we want the most qualified, hardest working folks doing a given job.
You would think that's the way.
And I have no problem with trying to help people who, look, if you grew up poor in Virginia, Minnesota, like a good friend of mine, and didn't have indoor plumbing until you joined the Army at 17, which tells you how bad things were if you were getting signed over at 17. If you're that guy, where's your privilege? Do you have more or less privilege than a daughter of two wealthy black physicians? And why are we playing this game? I have much less of an issue helping people who come from lower socioeconomic status, who don't have access to the same resources as others do, to try to help level that playing field. Let them go to what their hard work and their merit will let them get to, and don't let the fact that they come from a poor family stand in the way. Okay,
let's put the park break on this one. So now you're in office. Let's say you win. Let's paint this picture for these listeners, and this is for any city of any country of anywhere in listening to the show. One of our biggest problems is one of the programs that we help our needing mothers, fathers, whatever that is, the WIC program. I don't even know what the name of it is now. It's abused. It's used too much. They don't stop and say, we're not helping you get off of it. We're helping you stay on it.
That is the single biggest flaw behind our entire social welfare system. What is this system attempting to optimize for? Is it attempting to keep people on the dole for as long as possible? Or is it attempting to give people a pathway back to independence and becoming a taxpayer? And cynically, you can look at the system and say, well, if we keep people on the dole and say that, we don't want you to do too well. We want to put a hard ceiling on you. And we aren't going to phase out. We're going to cliff drop you off a program. So let's say you want to go back to work. You make $1 too much, and all of a sudden your health insurance goes away, and any other benefits go away, and any supplemental nutrition goes away. We're going to drop you off that cliff. The incentive there is to keep you below that level of barely sustainable poverty, and cynically to keep you there so that you can vote.
Keep you voting.
In one direction.
I was going to go there, but I want to let you do it.
Keep you vote in one direction. I don't think I've met really many or any people who say that we should not be providing. We should help people that are less fortunate than ourselves, who may have been cast out of a job or seen their industry go away or technology replace them or change.
Or wealth shuts them off.
Yes. Let's help those people retool and rejoin the workforce.
Right.
And let's absolutely have a plan to do that. But we don't. And that is the crux of the problem with our social services and welfare system, is that it incentivizes behavior that is antithetical to those folks finally getting back on their feet, retraining, retooling, getting back into the workforce and paying taxes in again.
Because everybody needs bodies right now.
Oh, everybody. I mean,
where'd they all go?
It's a really complicated question. It's a very fascinating question. So I think multifactorial, a lot of it initially was the fact that people were paid $17 an hour to stay at home. So if you add up all the incentives, we were paying greater than that wage, greater than, for many people, the wage that they would have earned in the market simply for staying at home. So
but that's ended.
That has ended.
Where'd they go?
So I think a lot of people retired. They looked at their 401k value and they said, I'm tired. I don't want to deal with a vaccine mandate. I don't want to wear a mask at work. I'm close enough where I can cut some expenses. I'm 62 years old and I'm just out. Peace. Those folks, unfortunately, are in for a rude awakening when the bottom falls out of the market and that the overinflated 401k comes back down to reality. And if they didn't have other means to help support themselves, it's going to be pretty tough. And then we might see some of those folks try to rejoin the workforce. But if you're in a stagflationary environment, there may not be the jobs available to absorb them, which will be very hard. And again, it's those people that are working class, working paycheck to paycheck, or fixed income who suffer the most when there's these economic downturns and when there's periods of, we have 20% inflation right now. And so that is extraordinarily difficult to deal with if you are attempting to survive on Social Security income alone, or just working and barely getting by. So maybe you saw a 10% wage inflation over the last year, but if you have 20% cost of living, it doesn't matter.
Right. It means nothing.
And it's across the board. It's every sector. From you pull open your Excel energy bill, the cost per therm literally doubled. Mm-hmm. You go to the gas station and now it's $5+ diesel, $5 premium.
Right.
It's insane. And I think people don't understand the diesel shortfall that we are experiencing. So on the East Coast, they are at like $6.20, $6.30 a gallon for diesel.
Wow.
They have significantly less refining capacity. We've shut off inflows of
crude,
partially processed crude that you could turn into those distillates that you need, for diesel and jet fuel. And we're not bringing online, any new drilling. We're making it harder to pump hydrocarbons from responsibly. Mm-hmm. If you say, look, I don't want Russian oil or Venezuelan oil, okay, but how about Canadian tar sand oil or stuff from the Bakken? But we don't want to move that. We would rather have a creaking pipeline that's more likely to rupture than have a responsible, efficient, new high-tech pipeline that's fully approved moving those hydrocarbons. It doesn't change the demand for the hydrocarbons at the end. It simply moves them in a more safer way.
So, grabbing overdrive again,
mm-hmm.
electric vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
You know that in Minnesota, that's not a real logical explanation here. Because until they've made those polymer batteries much more efficient in the cold, in sub-cold and zero cold, that it's just going to be another flash in the pan.
So I know about electric vehicles very well because I drove one over here. And I can tell you the pluses and minuses. I own diesel vehicles, electric vehicles, and gas vehicles. They all have their use case. So as you allude to, battery technology or lack thereof is the primary issue. Right now, with wet cell batteries, everything's too heavy. The recharge rates are too slow. And the cost per kilowatt hour of storage is too high. Time will take care of all of those. So solid-state batteries are out of the lab and into low-level production. They will increase with time. That solves the charging problem. So you can put 500 miles of range on in 10 minutes. So you stop and pee and grab a snack and a drink at the station, and they're very light, right? So it solves one of the big problems. You're not moving all this mass you don't need to move with a wet battery. Mm-hmm. They'll have a better duty cycle. They'll have a better life cycle, and they won't have quite as many toxic components that go into them. If you live in a city, electric cars make a lot of sense, provided that the energy you're putting into them is inexpensive. And we could talk about how energy policy has failed to do that. I mean, we should be greenlighting nuclear reactors left and right. Both can be the lowest cost per kilowatt hour if the eco-mentalists get out of the way, and are extraordinarily safe and totally carbon-free and provide reliable baseload forever. And all of the waste you'll ever produce can be stored safely on site and not moved. So we're not even having that discussion because we still have a nuclear moratorium, and that'll end as governor. But if you're charging your cars with dirty peak or less efficient peak power plants, that's not great. Renewables are very oversold and will underdeliver forever, and they may be a slice of power production, but they will not provide reliable baseload. Maybe at some point.
Well, if they invent more PVs, they'll do that.
Yeah, well, right. So you'll see PV efficiency go up slowly over time, and then you'll see this kind of like the battery cost storage come down, and then it'll improve the economics of the whole deal. I'm still not convinced that they're going to be competitive on a per megawatt hour with large scale nuclear or even gas for a very long time. So never say never. But look, the use case for an electric car, if you live in, say, Champlin, is pretty good. Or North Oaks, where I live, that's fine. And you drive just around the cities. It is terrible. Like, we've tried to take this car up to Virginia, Minnesota, okay? And you have to it's like playing Oregon Trail. How many times do I need to stop? What is going to break?
You better tell people what Oregon Trail is, because now...
Oh my gosh, I'm dating myself.
It's an old teletype from the U of M that we used to talk on, and we would do an Oregon Trail. You fuel up, you water your horses, and if you don't, you die.
Yeah, I was playing this with my kids. I played the Mac Classic version of this, where you're trying to make it across the Oregon Trail. It's a great way to learn about history, and you have to kind of hunt squirrels and get enough meat to make it across, and then someone in your party wants to get dysentery and die, and you got to make it across a river. Dysentery always.
So that's the Oregon Trail.
Yeah,
as
so
he's describing. So
yeah, so I'm like trying to go up to Virginia, and we're like, okay, well, where do we have to stop? Electric cars get crushed by cold weather, right? Chemistry doesn't function in cold weather. And so you'll take a car with an advertised range of 250 miles, and you're like barely able to get 140. It's crazy how bad that. Now they're a little better now. They've gone to air source heat pumps as opposed to resistive heating, and there's some other issues that made the older ones. But the point is, they're not ready for prime time, and they're not ready for interstate or even large intrastate travel without significant stops to repower. So they are an inferior mode of moving a population across large distances. And for anything that's got a high energy capacity, like say farming and moving equipment or tractor trailers, forget it. We're not even in the same universe of being close to being able to
efficient,
store enough energy.
Productive, quick. Yeah, you lose all of that.
Yeah. So we're a long ways away from it. And then you have to have the power infrastructure. So say someday you have the energy density in a battery to operate large-scale farm machinery with it. Good. What kind of transmission system do you have to get power out to those places?
And is it still good?
Yeah, and have it not lose so much in transit, right?
80% loss rate at OT4 cable from step down to a transmit. It's at least 80%.
Or, I mean, what do you just step up the voltage to 1,000,000, right, to move it?
With still no amperage.
Yeah.
So voltage ain't going to do no good.
Right.
I did a study yesterday. The state of Minnesota sent me out a what's your opinion type of thing, a survey. And it was about electric cars, stations, what should we do, what we do. And usually when I see them at this point of the game, they've already made plans. Mm-hmm. They just want to, pat themselves in the back and say, we're going to do this now. But it's out there. And they are already talking about this whole debacle of this, where you're going to put these stations. Mm-hmm. How, what, where. Are you going to protect the people who, when they won't stop takeaways? I don't know. But I did fill it out, and I says, you're that far off if you think this is going to make it happen, because you can't do it.
Yeah.
You just can't do it. Not yet.
No.
Maybe south of the rush line you can, but batteries heat up too, and their major fail is heat.
And why is this a role of government? Why are we doing? The market will solve this problem. Look,
we need Elon Musk. Elon, if you're listening, please listen.
Well, he's trying. I mean, he's trying. So many problems he can solve. The market should solve this. Like, look, I can give you a ride in the Tesla. Like, it's super fun. It's got one trick, and it's a hell of a trick. You go really fast, and it's really great. I think eventually we'll get there where you're going to have widespread electric car adoption, but let the market do it. Don't pass subsidies for this type of power and that type of power. If we're going to do anything, we should be driving down the cost per megawatt hour so that everyone's bill goes down, because expensive energy is a tax on every business and every household. And so what the left wants to do is pick renewables, which are not ready for prime time. What the right wants to do is perhaps put their thumb on the scale the other way and say, we don't want other technologies to advance, so we're going to give money to... Stop giving money to anybody. Let them sort it out. Get out of the way and let the market sort it out.
Let capitalism do its job.
It's awfully efficient.
Now, did you struck a note there for a second? You're in Hennepin County?
Ramsey.
Okay, so you're Ramsey County. Is your business also Ramsey?
Just barely.
Okay, we got a hit for the last time when the 2020 riots broke out, and we just got off of a disparity tax. Are you familiar with that?
No, tell me about it.
Fiscal disparity.
Okay.
We were on one for a while since the crash of 2005. The guys who were working, we get hit with an extra tax. As a business, we pay more because someone had to go out of business, something, just us, the guys carrying a heavier load. Mm-hmm. We just got off one, and we're on another one.
Sounds like socialist redistribution that penalizes people who are doing well to make up for issues the government has failed to do.
But yet we're in a surplus.
Well, yeah. They're going to spend as much of that as they can, but...
Oh, sure. And I'm offended. I want the whole world to know I'm offended they call it the tax that Wells bucks.
Yeah, well...
They weren't ever his bucks.
No, you overpaid. Look, if you had a business and you had a credit balance on the account, you could just ask for a check to refund the credit balance.
We don't call it O'Reilly's bucks.
Yeah.
We call it the guy who owns his bucks.
Yeah.
So I'm very offended with that. I'm like, you guys don't get it. Oh, we're getting $1,000 back. No, you're getting your $1,000 back. And now is it everybody $1,000? So let's say you paid $10,000,
Right?
And the guy who voted for a living paid nothing, and he gets $1,000 back.
That's what Walls wants to do.
Sure, he does. He didn't pay for it.
I would like long-term tax relief. I would like them to end the Social Security double tax with it and have massive middle-class tax cuts so that people can have money to buy diesel and gas and meat at the store. That's what they could be doing with it. But they're not going to. They're going to spend it on various and sundry projects. Yeah. You even saw like the frontline workers bill get a bunch of pork tacked onto it. They wanted to refill the unemployment trust fund, and then they tack on $100 million more that needs to be on that bill. It just doesn't need to be there, but it's just handouts.
So you win. Let's say you win. Mm-hmm. You're in government. How you fix that? Is there executive orders you sign?
I don't like EOs. I think there's a role for EOs as a temporary stopgap measure. Like, for example, day one, I would ban critical race theory with an EO. You're going to get sued, but it buys you some time to get legislation through. Really, these should be legislative answers to these problems. What I would like to do is just tell people what's going on. People are, I think, more willing to become engaged in this process at this point because they've seen what the career politicians do to us when we leave them alone. Mm-hmm. And they rip up the Constitution. They don't do anything that makes the lives of everyday Minnesotans better. They make business harder to do. They make our schools worse off and our streets less safe. Okay, well, let's just tell you what's going on in St. Paul. It can't be three people, like the leader of the House, leader of the Senate, the governor behind closed doors deciding what's good for all Minnesotans. That entire mindset has to end. And we won't get citizen servant governance until we start to make real inroads into exposing that this is how things have been going in St. Paul. There are some, good legislators there, but much of the system is predicated on not doing things that I think the majority of Minnesotans want us to do, which is be transparent, limited, good, responsible governance. I don't think that's a controversial statement of the proper role of governance. And so I want to talk to people directly. The people will elect me and put me in the role of the state executive. I'm a separate co-equal branch of government. My job isn't to play nice with anybody. It's to stand up for the people who put me there and say, this is what I think the role of governance is. I told you this when I ran. You put me in this position. Therefore, you think that's a good set of ideas, and I'm going to defend those. Does that mean I win every argument? No, absolutely not. I'm not a tin pot dictator like Tim Walz. I am there to execute the office well, preserve the Constitution, and try to rein in this out-of-control government that's in every facet of our lives and is giving us less and less back for what we pay in taxes. Mm-hmm. So I will do that, and I will do that by going directly to the people, and I will do that in a way that explains why conservative governance and conservative ideals and hewing to the Constitution are all great things for all of us. And hopefully we can start to, right the ship, and then I can find someone to replace me after 4 years to come in and kind of continue that work. And I think you do that for, 3 terms in a row, this state will look a lot different, and I think we will really start to outcompete the states around us.
2 questions next. Mm-hmm. What do you say to your opponents right now? Now, these are opponents, whether it's Democrats or whether it's Republicans, what do you say to them?
I would ask them why they're running. Are they running for their own political career? Are they running because they want to be a part of this political elite? Or are they running because they want to defend this constitutional republic that is unequivocally under attack, that's being driven further apart every day, that's watching the Constitution be trampled upon, that's watching our economic prospects go down the tubes, that's watching our educational system suffer and our streets become less safe? Why are you running? Why are you here? Why are you serving? I'm here because I'm frustrated with what these career politicians have done for far too long. Mm-hmm. And many good people like me just sat on the sidelines, content to say, well, someone with this or that letter after their name is going to represent my interests and make things better for me. They're not going to. The people need to stand up and, reassert ourselves as the people who should be in charge of government, the people who should serve the state. And serving is really what it is that we need to do. in many ways, my life gets substantially worse if I get elected. And I'm willing to deal with that pain.
Yes, it does.
It does. For a period of time. And then I want to go back to my practice and spend some more time with my kids. But I hope to inspire other people to get involved at their local level, run for school board, run for city council.
Whatever
mayor,
that is.
Whatever that is, get involved, because don't make that assumption like I did for so long that, freedom is just something that naturally happens. Freedom is like the highest state of entropy, and it will devolve towards totalitarianism and pain if we don't defend it. So we all have to get in there and in our way fight to maintain this most amazing of countries that we are all privileged to live in.
Okay.
And that is why I'm running, and that is the message that I would take. And that's what I would implore all other people running for office to really think about. Why are you here, and how can you make America better?
Second question. What are you telling Waltz right now?
Walz is...
Waltz, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, he's a career politician. He's very slick. I think Walz does what his handlers tell him to do. If there's an independent thought in there, he's not going to let us know it. I think he'll do whatever the DFL authorities tell him to do.
Authorities? Oh.
Yeah. I think that his handlers, he's not allowed. If he has an opinion, he's not allowed to have it. And he will trade on this, I did the best I could, aw shucks mentality, I'm with you, I'm for you. He'll gaslight about what reality is. But ask yourself, if you're a voter, how much worse are you than 4 years ago? How much more does everything cost? How much harder is it to start or run a business? How much better are your kids' grades in schools? How much safer are your streets? And can you tolerate 4 more years of Tim Walz and the radical left continuing to do that to you? You have a choice. And maybe you've never voted for a Republican ever in your life. Just vote because there's someone that's not a career politician who's tired of what these folks are doing. And we can get back to disagreeing on this policy or that, but I will honestly work as hard as I can every day to make this state better so that my kids can live here, I can continue to live here, and that all of you can continue to live here. And I think Tim Walz just doesn't care anymore if he ever did. And he's a cynical politician that I think needs to be retired after 1 term.
I was kind of looking for the Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'm coming for you. But that works too, I'm good with that. Okay, we are 29 into this one. So any last thoughts that we can quick out?
No, I think that last answer summed it up. We have a historic opportunity in this state to fundamentally rewrite the path forward for Minnesota. And we have a choice about whether we're going to just send another career politician either in there for 4 more years or whether we're going to endorse a career politician or a proto-career politician in St. Paul if we're talking about the GOP endorsement, which is in a weekend in Rochester. And I think that it's time that we send an authentic constitutional conservative there who wants to serve and then go back to doing their day job. And I think along the process, recruit other people in to help carry that water after I'm gone. And that's why I'm running for governor. That's what I hope to do. And I think that message is going to resonate around this state.
You're going to do the thing? I'm running for governor. I approve this message.
My name is Neil Shah. I'm running for governor, and I approve this message.
There it is. I'll do some segments on that separately. So for HuttCast, an excellent show today. And I'll tell you what, boy, you knocked it out of the park. And I want to thank you for HuttCast for coming on and giving us your time today, right after your baby,
Oh, it's a privilege and an honor to be here. I'm looking forward to spending the afternoon with Sarah and Dessa. Okay.
Well, HuttCast is wrapping up. And the Australian guys, yes, again, we know that you're going through that, but there's nothing we can do. We can try and help. Let's see. We got pulled out of Russia. Our show is no longer in Russia. Of course, that's pretty much the hate book thing. But you can still get to it on the black web. So if you guys out there in Latvia are doing it, you can tell your buddies over there that we can still get you over. HuttCast again, signing off. Have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. And that's a wrap for HuttCast. HuttCast is, again, a pragmatic approach to seeing things how some people see them. If you like our show, give us a thumbs up on the Facebook site. Again, for HuttCast, thank you again. Have a wonderful evening.